It's good. I should be recording now. So, well, hello. How are you doing today? We'll pull up a chair and have a seat because this is going to be a barn burner and talk about some breaking news, even though it's happened some time ago. Nobody's ever heard about it. We, naturally, right? So, anyhow, if anybody needs help with their silver, you know where to go. Just click on the description. Other than that, I got a special guest that I'm bringing on. He's my mentor, and he's taught me a lot about the law, like I've told y'all before a long time ago, and pretty much started learning under him around 2015. And he's been doing this and helping people for a very long time. So if anybody wants to help contribute to his work, you can sign up for his class. That is a really great way at ruleoflawradio.com and help him. That'll help support him so he can keep continuing to do this type of work that you're going to hear right now. So first off, let me go ahead and bring Eddie on. Eddie, how are you doing today?
So far, so good. How are you, Scott?
Oh man, just staying out of the heat. It's hot enough to cook biscuits out there right now.
Yeah, it is that. I got 109 on my scale over here.
Oof, man, it's brutal. But talk about where the heat really is down in Bexar County on the sheriffs and the whole court system and all that stuff going on down there. So why don't you kind of bring us up to speed on basically the kind of the skinny on the case in general and how you were helped this woman to overcome what was ultimately she was facing felony charges, 15 years in prison, being framed up by the sheriff down in Bexar County and the sheriff's deputies along down there with it. So take it away.
Yeah, I have a friend, Ruby Marie Sandoval, that, like you, she was a student in my downtown class for a long time and a good friend of mine. And one day she was at home, and it was about 1 p.m., 1:59, 49 p.m. Bexar County Sheriff's Narcotics Unit busted through her front door, put her in handcuffs, set her on the floor, went to a back room of her house, and came back out carrying a big bag of methamphetamine, 2.2 pounds, 1 full kilo, in fact. Street value of approximately $200,000. Now, Ruby has never seen $200,000 in her life. At the time they arrested her, Ruby had a single $2 bill to her name. When they raided her house and did their alleged search, their search consisted of them coming in, two or three deputies handcuffing her and putting her on the floor. The rest of them marched straight to the back room where there was a cardboard box sitting that was labeled storage. And in that box is where they retrieved these 2.2 pounds of methamphetamine that they brought back out, held up in the air, and declared to be methamphetamine. They hadn't tested it. They hadn't opened it. They just held it up and said methamphetamine. My guess is the reason they did that was for their body camera and their photo op. So they could procure more federal funding for these drug busts. But in any case, the entire raid from start to finish, breaking in the door, getting the drugs, and having her standing in front of a magistrate was 11 minutes.
That's a, that when I read that in the that's being filed and saw how fast they had broke the door down, arrested her, and got her in front of a judge. I mean, holy smoke! 11 minutes.
Yep.
Carry on.
And not only that, they did not search any other part of her house. They did not search any other outside area. They went straight to that room, straight to that box, and pulled out those drugs. Now, here's the problem. The problem is that box didn't belong to Ruby. If they had done what she requested, which is something we mentioned in the lawsuit, and dusted that box for her fingerprints and tested that box and its contents for her DNA, it would have come up absolutely clean because it wasn't hers. She had never touched it. She had never opened it. She had no idea what was in it.
Well,
So how did the box get in her house?
right.
Well, the guys that raided her house are the Bexar County Sheriff's Narcotics Unit's deputies. Okay, they're the drug task force of the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. The deputies that came in had procured themselves a confidential informant, name of Isaac Garza. Isaac Garza had gotten caught by the same unit back in 2017 and busted for drug trafficking and selling narcotics. Okay, he was the trafficker, he was the seller. And the box that was in Ruby's house had been brought to her house the evening before by Isaac Garza, the confidential informant of the Bexar County Sheriff's Narcotics Unit. He had literally walked up to her porch with his 8 or 9-year-old daughter standing right next to him, carrying this cardboard box, and told Ruby, who was on her actually leaving because she was on her way to play late night bingo there in San Antonio. But he called her just as she was coming out of the door and said, "Hey, we got kicked out of our apartment or house or whatever it is they were living in, and I don't have anywhere to keep this box of stuff. Can I leave it in your house for a few days so I can either get another house or a storage unit where I can move it?" And Ruby was like, "Okay, sure, no problem." So Ruby opened the door, let him go back in, and he went straight to that back room. She said, "There's a room back there. There's an empty spot on the shelf that box will probably fit. Just take it back there and put it in there, and you can leave it there until whatever." Then the guy came out. Ruby locked up and left. About 9 a.m. the next morning, Ruby was still asleep because she didn't get in until the wee hours from late night bingo. But about 9 o'clock the next morning, this Isaac Garza, started burning up her phone with text messages. He kept texting her asking, "Hey, are you home? Hey, is the box still in the same place? Hey, can I come get my box?" All these questions and information about where is Ruby and where's his box? Is it still there? Have you done anything with it? Et cetera, et cetera. Well, Ruby didn't see these messages till, I don't know, somewhere right around 1 to 1:30. And at 1:49, Bexar County Sheriff's deputies, by the way, right between 1:30 and 1:49, she finally texted Garza back and said, "I'm home and I'm awake now. Yeah, you can come get your box if you want it." At 1:49, Bexar County Sheriff's deputies busted through her front door, and they went and got the drugs, not the confidential informant. Well, this was a complete and total frame-up. And the way it worked was when Garza had gotten arrested in 2017, and that was, I think, March or May of 2017, he got busted. Well, this frame up on Ruby occurred in October of 2017. But in between him getting busted and Ruby's frame up, Garza had done the exact same thing to 3 other people by planting drugs in the home of one of the people that got busted. He had used his little girl to transport the drugs into the house inside of a pink backpack and put the whole thing, the drugs, the pink backpack, all of that, in a hole in the wall in the bathroom of this house and covered it up. And then within minutes of he and his little girl leaving the scene, Bexar County rolled up, did a drug raid on the house, went straight to the bathroom, came out with the backpack, the whole 9 yards. Which means that for them to know it was in a specific bathroom in a hole that you couldn't see until you moved the wall panel that he had put in front of it, the deputies knew exactly where to go, which means he had to have told them as he was leaving or right after he left the house. Now, he gained entry by asking them if his little girl could use the bathroom because she really had to go. But the thing is, he had actually called them at the house 30 plus minutes before he actually showed up to let his little girl in to use the bathroom. Now, somewhere in 30 minutes, you could have found a place for that little girl to go to the bathroom. But she went in the house with a backpack. She came out without a backpack. And then within 15 minutes, that backpack and its contents were in the hands of the Bexar County Sheriff's Narcotics Unit. And in it was 2.2 pounds, 1 kilo of methamphetamine, exactly the same amount as was discovered and type that was discovered at Ruby's house. Exactly the same. Now, it is my theory, and we haven't got to depose Garza, the confidential informant, to verify this, but it is my theory that the Garza's agreement when he got busted to become a confidential informant was this. He had to guarantee the district attorney's office and the Bexar County Sheriff's Office at least 2 more drug busts and prosecutions as good or greater than his own. It's my theory that he was actually busted with that exact same 2.2 pounds of methamphetamine. And they kept recycling that 2.2 pounds to plant them on other people. And Garza could not have done that by himself. He would, remember, 2.2 pounds of meth ready to go on the street to sell is $200,000 worth of drugs on the street, which none of the people framed up in these scenarios could have afforded in their wildest dreams. None of these people had money. And in neither of these busts did the cops discover any drug scales, cutting stations, packaging stations, little baggies for dime bags. None of the paraphernalia associated with a drug lab or a drug distribution center existed. The drugs were the only thing that was found. No excess cash was found in either place. Nothing.
Right. So now let's move forward to how the prosecutor was trying to prosecute this case to get it swept under the rug like the other previous 4 before.
Yeah, okay. Remember the text messages I was talking about where Garza had actually texted Ruby to ask about the box to make sure it was still where he had left it and that she was home. Now, Garza is the only one who could have told the deputies where that box was, just like Garza was the only one who could have told the deputies where the pink backpack was. I guess none of these deputies were curious enough to ever ask the question of Garza, well, how did you come to be in contact with the pink backpack that you tell us is in the side of a wall? And how did you come to be in contact with a cardboard box in the back room of a house that isn't yours? They never thought to ask those questions. But those text messages that the CI sent to Ruby's phone asking about the box clearly showed the informant claiming ownership of the box that was in that back room, and thus ownership of its contents, because he's the one that brought it into the house. Well, as soon as Ruby got out of jail, which was about 12 hours after she got arrested, she was able to finally get her dad, who was very ill, to come down there and post bond for her and get her out. Well, as soon as she got home, she did 2 things. She called me and told me what happened and described everything that had led up to that, including the text messages. And I told her, find some way of getting copies of those text messages, whether it's screenshots, print them off somewhere, I don't care, but you get copies of those text messages from your phone and you send them or you give them to whatever person they assign you as an attorney. Okay. Well, Ruby, not having any money, all they could do to get her an attorney was assign her a public defender. The first attorney she actually had wasn't a public defender. It was a friend of her dad's who was her dad's attorney, but he was a civil attorney, not a criminal attorney. So he was helping her at first, but he was thinking she was guilty. He wasn't going to buy that she wasn't the one at fault here and kept trying to get her to take a plea deal. So she fired him. Then they had to assign her a public defender because she couldn't afford an attorney. So they assigned her a public defender, and she had given the first guy copies of these messages, and he ignored them. She gave the public defender copies of these messages, and he ignored them. Okay. The second, and then he wouldn't do anything except try to get her to take a plea deal, just like the first attorney did. And I kept telling her, Ruby, do not take a plea deal. You didn't do this. You're telling me you didn't do it. Do not let them talk you into taking a plea deal. I don't care what they're threatening you with. Don't take the plea deal. And so she kept refusing the plea deal. And then finally, after about the third attempt by her public defender to get her to take the plea because they kept lowering the amount of time they were offering her, they had originally threatened her with 15 to life. Then they went to 25 to life, like they did in the case of the other people that they had already convicted that had also been framed. And she wouldn't take any of the plea deals. So they started going down. Do this and it'll be this amount of time. If you'll take it now, it'll be this amount of time. They kept pressuring her to take it, and so did her own public defender, even after she had given him copies of the messages. So I wrote up a document and told her, give this to your public defender and make him sign it. And Scott, I gave you a copy of that document. You're free to go over that anytime you want to with your guests, or we can do it on another call or whatever, or if you want to do it today, we can do that too. But basically the document said that the public defender, as her attorney, was being demanded that he defend her to the best of his ability, not to waive any of her rights, and that she would not be accepting any plea deals at any time ever. And if he attempted to compel her to get a plea deal, she'd bar grieve him. And if he attempted to get himself taken off the case because she wouldn't take a plea deal, she would bar grieve him. And she would sue him for ineffective assistance of counsel, malpractice, and anything else that she could get to stick. Well, and we'd also bar grieve him for attempting to breach a contract by getting out of it by not wanting to perform under the terms of the contract, which was defend her because she's innocent. So he immediately ran to the judge and asked to get released off the case. And that became our permanent strategy to delay them getting her into court. Was every public defender they gave her after that, the first thing she did after they were assigned by the judge during their first meeting with their new client was to give them a copy of this same document and tell them sign it or get out. And every single one of them went to the judge and begged to be let off the case because they were not going to defend her. Which proves you can't get a fair trial in Texas because your public defender won't do his fucking job.
But and that's in every state. So
yes, but in any case, how this led up to what the district attorney was doing was the district attorney by this point had been made fully aware of the existence of the text messages and the fact that those text messages proved the drugs did not belong to Ruby. But instead of dismissing the charges against Ruby and throwing the case out, the assistant district attorney that was prosecuting her doubled down and went after her even harder to take the plea deal. Knowing she was innocent, she insisted she take a plea deal or she was going to prosecute her and send her to jail for the rest of her life. Well, this went on for a little over 2 years. Finally, I suggested, Ruby, go to the media, go to the news, go to somebody, tell them what the hell is happening. And she went to KSAT 12 News in San Antonio and spoke with Tim Gerber, who's an investigative reporter with their Defender news team there. So once she told him everything that was going on, showed him the exculpatory text messages and told him and showed her the court records to show what the prosecutors were doing and what her attorneys were doing and all this, KSAT 12 decided to do a long-term investigation of all of this. It took them a little over a year and a half to get their investigation done. In that year and a half, they discovered a whole bunch of things, including the fact that they were able to find additional evidence or at least testimony that this CI was framing people by also interviewing the 3 people that had been convicted prior to Ruby's case. Because all of them took plea deals. Their attorneys told them, take a plea, cut your time, et cetera, et cetera. One of the guys even took a 10-year sentence so that the girl, the female who actually owned the house where the drugs were found, could get deferred adjudication because she was a paraplegic and she would have died not having the care she needed at home by being in prison. So he took an extra 2 years on his 8-year sentence and got 10 in order for her to get deferred adjudication so she didn't have to go to prison. And then the other guy got 8 years, and they took a plea deal, and they had served 2 years of those 8 and 10-year sentences before Ruby's evidence in her case got their cases overturned. And once they were overturned, they were released from prison. And they're all currently suing Sheriff Salazar, Bexar County Sheriff's Office, the BCSNU deputies, and everybody else involved, just like Ruby is now doing.
Good.
But go ahead.
Go ahead. No, good. Go ahead.
But it wasn't until Ruby went to KSAT 12 News and they aired this story that was in September of 2020 when they aired the story, that her case was finally dismissed in May 11th of 2021. After all this got exposed in the news and a lot of stations picked it up and a lot of newspapers picked it up and started running it, that's when the case against her finally started getting attention. So they fired the old ADA from her case, not from the district attorney's office, but at least from her case. And a new one got assigned. And the new one immediately did a review of the record, verified the text messages were real, and immediately went to the conviction integrity unit there in Bexar County, and they started investigating the confidential informant's record and found the 3 convictions he had already gotten on people, and that was the 3 I just mentioned. And that got Ruby's case dismissed and got their cases all overturned.
Right.
So after she went to the news was the only time she started getting any justice.
Right.
But fortunately, she had the evidence and somebody to tell her what to do with it to get it done. And it saved her.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Well, now we're in the process of trying to get the attorney she's got for the civil lawsuit to do it correctly so that she can win this. Because this should be a slam dunk case for even the worst attorney on the planet. But that doesn't mean jack squat if the attorney cannot file a decent lawsuit that will survive a 12B6 challenge in federal court. And this will be the one that I've spent the entire past week rewriting for her lawyer. For her lawyer actually now looks like an actual lawsuit. It's formatted properly. It's sectioned properly. It's got all the proper information. It just needs all the claims put in properly, which I can't do because I don't have a current copy of O'Connor's federal causes of action so that I can write up the cause of action the way the courts expect to read it. So her attorney's going to have to at least do that much correctly to get the lawsuit to stick. But everything else in this lawsuit is me.
Well, like I say, and if people want any type of consulting, you can, I'll have the email in there. You can give out the email too, so people can email you to have any type of consulting work. If anybody needs any help out there, he'd be willing to help. Of course, nobody works for free anymore, so everybody, makes a dime at least, and he accepts silver. He loves silver. And
silver
gold.
Or gold for that.
I know. I had to throw gold in there. Don't worry. So, but yeah, anybody that, is questioning, because what you did is Bexar County, here's the sad reality. Nobody's been fired. Right.
Hell, nobody's been charged with a crime in all these frame-ups. No deputy's been disciplined for misusing the confidential informant. And my lawsuit, as I've written it based upon the facts as we currently know them, we're accusing the sheriff's office of framing people with the help of a confidential informant. Because here's the problem with the way this all played out. 2.2 pounds of methamphetamine in every single case. That doesn't happen, ever. The exact same quantity and type of drugs in every single drug bust this confidential informant and narcotics unit is involved in. Doesn't happen. There's no cash, no other drug paraphernalia, nothing in the places where these drugs are found. On top of that, you're talking $600,000 worth of drugs in total, which means there should be in the evidence lockup at Bexar County, since there's 3 different drug busts that we know of, and each one of them for 2.2 pounds of methamphetamine. If they're not recycling these drugs and planting them on people, that means the Bexar County Narcotics evidence room should have 6.6 pounds minimum of methamphetamine directly related to only these 3 cases. If they've only got 2.2 pounds relating only to these 3 cases, they have been taking those drugs out of evidence, giving them to the informant, and the informant has been planting them on people, and there is no way in hell the sheriff's deputies were not in on that.
Oh, yeah. Now we're talking Rico.
Okay? There is no way. Now, if they do happen to have 6.6 pounds of methamphetamine, then we have a new problem. How did their confidential informant stay alive? Because if their confidential informant was getting 2.2 pounds of meth from his actual drug supplier and then letting those drugs get seized by the cops, whoever he's buying those drugs from is going to bury his ass face down so people have a place to park their bike. Because there is no way the guy buying your drugs as the supplier turns around and constantly loses everybody he gets those drugs and plants them on, get raided by the cops, and he loses his entire supply in one swipe. There is no way you do not assume that that guy is not working with the cops.
Right.
And there is no way that guy sees another sunrise because he can point fingers at you anytime he wants to.
Oh, yeah.
And because that didn't happen, that leaves theory number 1.
It's amazing, and it just like the corruption is just outstanding everywhere. And
Well,
we were because you brought up,
well,
about
yeah, but let's look at how that corruption exists. Believe it or not, the cops are not corrupt because they're keeping the drugs or they're stealing the drug runners' money. The cops are corrupt because they're taking bribes from the feds in the form of federal funding to create drug crimes in order to get that money.
Bingo.
See, every drug bust they make gets reported to the feds. Just like every person in jail at roll call in the morning and in the evening. The higher the head count, the more federal funding they get for their jail. Everything that happens to you at the state level in these kinds of cases is about that agency that made the bust and the arrest being able to get federal funding from it. And that funding can come in the form of money, equipment, vehicles. Where the hell do you think these local police stations with 4 cops get a fucking Bearcat?
I know.
Why do they even need a Bearcat?
I know.
They've got 2 stoplights and 8 houses. Why the hell do they need a Bearcat? But they get it.
Yeah.
Because they made a drug bust somewhere.
Well, this is more, it's just more proof that people have to know, things about the law. And she was smart enough to know to call you, at least. She's been listening, and so knowing where your rights are, but such an obvious frame up. And knowing this is another deal of malicious prosecution to seek, to get that prosecution. And it's the same way all these DAs are doing. That's why they're hammering to take a deal and just railroading people. Just like when I was telling you about Dr. DeRusso a few minutes ago and how they railroaded him. It was just imaginable. You wouldn't think it would happen, but it does. And if you don't have any help to be able to navigate the corruption, you're going to get swallowed up by it. And it's a learning curve. And like I say, I've been listening to Randy and Eddie for years, and all I do is it just helps sharpen my sword a little bit. So I encourage everybody, you know, if you want to help Eddie out, man, this is a good chance. He needs all the help he can get because he's doing this for the people and helping a lot of people out. And a lot of people don't realize how long he has been at it. So
Yeah,
I want to
this is
thank
not
you.
even my first drug case to help people on. I need both hands and my toes to count the number of drug cases I've helped people with.
Right.
That doesn't even include right now I'm helping a guy with a murder case.
Holy shit.
Um, I mean, I've done everything from the traffic tickets up to the worst you can get, a murder case.
Mm.
Um, and if people would just stop with this idiotic patronage stuff. I mean, imagine what would have happened to Ruby and these other three people if they'd attempted to defend themselves and walked into the court saying, "I have no contract with you about your drugs.
Oh, I
I'm
stand
an
on.
American national
Yeah,
and I'm
I stand.
standing on the land and you can take it out of my social security account. And if you don't like that, call the Pope, the Queen of England, or the Postmaster General. They'll tell you to leave me alone."
Oh, I've heard everything. It's ridiculous. But like, what is your favorite saying? You learn the law, and you can use it to beat them over their own head with it, right?
Yep. You take their rule book and you beat them black and blue with it.
You beat them to death with their own book. I mean,
You
and it can
learn to
be
do
done.
that, and you've got a fighting chance. You do any of the rest of this stuff, they're going to throw you so far under the jail, they're going to have to install plumbing to get sunlight to you.
Yeah. And in reality, it's like we were talking about, it's going because she had such a strong case and went to the news, ultimately is what turned it around.
Yeah, they do not want the light of day shining on their shenanigans.
Hmm.
But you have to go about exposing it to the light of day the right way. You
Right.
have to be able to go to that news media, for instance, and show them on a factual basis why everything that's being done to you is wrong.
Well, this is why social media is so big now. Nobody knew about. I didn't. And see, that was September 2020 was when during all the pandemic. It
Exactly.
may have made the news, but I guarantee you it was swallowed up by the death count going on back then. You
Yeah,
remember?
or the story of people getting killed in the hospitals on respirators, or
That story got swallowed up. Nobody, they aired it. The people that knew when they saw the story, in San Antonio, like, oh shit, we got a problem. We got our sheriff here. He's over framing people. Okay, the DA. Who's the DA? Get that son of a bitch out of here now. Shit.
yeah, the
And
original DA when she was busted was a guy named LaHood. The guy that's there now, Gonzalez, we're suing him because this was still allowed to go on his watch.
mm,
Because the prosecution against Ruby was still ongoing despite evidence to the contrary, even while he was DA.
right.
So he was still responsible for that first ADA maliciously prosecuting her, no matter how you slice this pie.
Hmm. I
So,
agree.
despite the fact that he's a prosecutor and she's a prosecutor, and normally you can't sue them no matter what, I put them in the lawsuit anyway. The attorney doesn't want to pursue it, he can take them out. But they're in there for that reason.
Well, I mean, we could go to all kinds of reasons why they're responsible, but that's a whole show right there. So,
Yes.
so anyhow, well, social media is definitely one of the game changers, and had this story made more it into the social media realm, because like I say, I didn't even know. That's why we're doing this show now. We're going to talk about it now, even though we're late to the game. It's educating a lot of people and exposing things that are going right here in Texas. Everybody, because I hear people, oh, my state, da, da, da. I was like, man, Texas is corrupt as shit. Don't shut up. you know?
Yeah, you're not going to find any states that's not doing this. Every state is doing it. Every town is doing it if they have any idea they can get away with it. The only towns where this isn't happening is where the only cop in town is somebody in that town's son. And
Right.
everybody knows everybody.
Exactly.
That's the only town where this is potentially not happening. Even in those towns, it's still possible, but for the most part, those would be the only ones where it's not. If they've got more than 2 cops and they have the ability to get money from the feds and to operate outside of knowing everybody in town and being responsible for that, they will do whatever the hell they think they can get away with.
Right. Well, I want to appreciate you for coming on, and we're going to go ahead and cap this one off. But this was a very compelling story. The strategy, again, was very simple. When they assigned you a public attorney, you give, I'm going to put this letter, you want me to put this letter up on Telegram?
Oh, sure.
Oh, hell yeah. So I'm going to put it up on Telegram so everybody can get a copy of how to hold your uh, public defender accountable if you are assigned one, and they will run. And that what Eddie was ultimately doing is once that document got in front of these people, in front of these attorneys, and they decide they're going to run and bail out. Okay, great. He was stalling them out because they had to dig to get some information requests, which are stalling that they were stalling her out to get the information so that they could use to help complete and finish the timeline so that they could submit that to the news station. But they were buying time. And that was the key factor because what were they trying to do? Railroad her right on through the system as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah. And the nice thing about this document when you give it to your attorney, do not give it to the attorney when you first meet with them, unless they are assigned by a court. If they're an actual public defender, once they have a meeting with you, they're assigned to you.
Right.
So they have been assigned. They are now officially your attorney. So you can give them a copy of this already filled out. And everything you need to fill out is highlighted already.
Right.
So you know exactly what to change. You give a copy of it to them and say, sign this. If you're my attorney, sign this. They're not going to sign it. They're immediately going to take it, though, and run straight to the judge and say, I don't want this case. I want to be taken off this case. And what that will do is it will not count against you because you fired your attorney. No, you didn't. Your attorney quit through no fault of yours because all you did was ask your attorney to do his freaking job. And he went to the court and begged them, don't make me do my job. Let me off this case so I don't have to do my job. And when they do that, you're going to object to it. Objection. I have a contract with this guy that you guys put in place. If you let him go, you're tortiously interfering with my contract for him to be my attorney. And he's breaching that contract by trying not to protect my rights and do his job. He's not acting in my best interest. He's acting in his own. You make that argument to the court, that attorney, there is nothing they can do to make you the one responsible. All of it falls on the attorney. Then you immediately turn around and bar grieve him for every one of those things. Make his life a living hell even after the fact. Okay?
I love it.
Now, you said something about me giving out contact information. If people need to email me for questions or help, I will gladly help you if I can. But as I said, I can't work for free, folks. I hate to put it that way, but I got bills to pay like everybody else. And so I've got to do what I got to do because this is what I do. And it's all that I do other than train dogs when I'm able to do that. So the email address you can send to is taooflaw, TAOOFLAW @gmail.com or rangerx64 @gmail.com. Either of those two, or you can use Eddie @ruleoflawradio.com. Any of those 3 addresses, and you can get in touch with me.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put all the information in the description so everybody, there is no excuse why you can't get a hold of him. If you have questions, something that's a real serious top issue, give him a call. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I can't guarantee I can help you, but I can listen. I can look at what you've got, the facts and the evidence, and tell you, okay, based upon what you said and the facts as you presented them, if they're accurate, here's what I suggest you do.
Right.
What I'm giving you is not legal advice. It's just simply a recommendation on how to use whatever law available to you is to do what needs to be done. And even though I hate attorneys and I will never ever recommend an attorney to anyone, like a direct reference, go hire this attorney or that attorney, because I am not going to be responsible for that attorney not doing their job right. So I'm not going to recommend an attorney, but I will tell you if I think you don't have what you need to have as far as knowledge and understanding to do it yourself. And so you need to go find one that handles these types of cases and ask them these questions, and these are the answers you should be getting from them if they're going to actually be able to help you. Those kind of things I can do.
Well, that's more than any help that anybody's going to find out there, I promise you. And it's going to be solid advice.
Yeah,
Even
and
if
I promise I will not sell you one patronat theory to rely on in any of the stuff that I do.
yeah, no. And if it's, the tough love, he will give you some tough love too. So don't worry.
Yeah, everybody says I'm not the nicest guy, but I've learned why attorneys are blunt. I've learned why they just say things very matter of factly and they say it without any concern for somebody's feelings. And that's because until you get their attention, people don't actually listen.
There, thank you very much. I've been saying that for quite some time. So that's one hell of a place to end it right there. So thanks, Eddie, for all you do. I know I'm going to put this out. I hope, let's see what happens. See if the people really respond and we'll go from there. But thanks a lot. Everybody stay frosty. Donald Trump's a fucking genius.